The year is 1934. The world teetered precariously on the brink of another devastating conflict, still reeling from the scars of the first. Yet, in Italy, a different kind of war was being waged, not with bullets and bombs, but with ideology and spectacle. Benito Mussolini, the charismatic and ruthless dictator, had seized control, wrapping the nation in the suffocating embrace of fascism. His regime, built on a foundation of nationalistic fervor and totalitarian control, sought to project an image of strength, unity, and undeniable superiority to the global stage. And what better canvas for such a grand display than the world's most popular sport, football? Mussolini envisioned the 1934 FIFA World Cup not merely as a sporting event, but as a colossal propaganda machine. It was to be a meticulously choreographed triumph, a testament to the might and efficiency of fascist Italy, designed to legitimize his rule in the eyes of an increasingly wary international community. The whispers of political turmoil, the heavy hand of the state, and the chilling suppression of dissent were to be drowned out by the roar of adoring crowds and the undeniable glory of victory. The cup, in Mussolini's mind, was already Italy's, a symbolic conquest that would elevate fascism above all other ideologies. International skepticism, however, hung heavy in the air. Nations watched with a mixture of apprehension and unease as Italy prepared to host the tournament. Reports of political intimidation, the stifling of free speech, and the cult of personality surrounding the Duce filtered across borders. How could a fair sporting competition flourish under such an oppressive regime? The questions lingered, unanswered, as the world held its breath. At the heart of this grand, sinister spectacle stood the Italian national team, a group of immensely talented footballers thrust into an impossible situation. Men like Giuseppe Meazza, the dazzling forward whose every move captivated fans, Luis Monti, the Argentinian-born powerhouse, now donning the Azzurri jersey, and Giovanni Ferrari, the elegant midfielder, were not just athletes. They were pawns in a political game far larger than any match they would ever play. Their backgrounds were varied, their dreams initially simple: to represent their country, to win. But the pressure placed upon them was unlike anything a sportsman had ever known. It was immense, suffocating, and existential. The fascist regime's mandate was chillingly clear: win or die. This wasn't hyperbole. It was a thinly veiled threat, delivered with cold precision. The players understood that failure wasn't an option. It was a betrayal of the nation, of the Duce, and the consequences would be severe. Their families, their futures, their very lives were tied to the outcome of this tournament. Mussolini himself, with his piercing gaze and imposing presence, had made it known. The players were not just representing Italy, they were representing fascism, and fascism did not lose. Early training camps were transformed from arenas of athletic preparation into sites of psychological conditioning. The drills were intense, almost military-like in their precision and demand for unwavering obedience. Coaches, under direct orders from the regime, pushed the players to their absolute physical and mental limits. Every pass, every tackle, every shot was imbued with a nationalistic fervor. The team was isolated, their lives meticulously controlled, their minds saturated with propaganda. They were told they were supermen, champions of a new, glorious empire. Failure was not just defeat. It was a stain on the national honor, an unforgivable weakness. The constant surveillance, the omnipresent portraits of Mussolini, and the fervent speeches about duty and sacrifice created an atmosphere of relentless pressure. The players, though supremely gifted, carried the weight of an entire ideology on their shoulders. Visuals from this era are stark, often black and white, filled with menacing fascist symbols that permeate every aspect of Italian life. The stark contrasts of light and shadow perfectly captured the mood of the time. The bright, manufactured optimism of the regime against the dark, creeping fear of its subjects. Newsreels depicted disciplined soldiers marching in unison, massive rallies where thousands saluted their leader, and the pervasive Duce chants that echoed through the streets, all serving to reinforce the image of an unstoppable, unified nation. The football stadiums, adorned with banners bearing the fascist symbol, became temples to this new order, where sport was merely another tool for political indoctrination. The chilling pronouncement from Mussolini himself, delivered with an unblinking stare to the assembled team, set the stage for the unimaginable stakes. "You are not merely playing a game," he reportedly declared, his voice resonating with absolute authority. "You are fighting for the glory of Italy, for the destiny of fascism. Win, or you will answer to me." The message was unmistakable, the threat palpable. The weight of that declaration settled heavily on every player's shoulders, a burden that would define their entire tournament. This was not just a World Cup. It was a test of national will, a gamble with the highest possible stakes, orchestrated by a dictator who brooked no dissent and accepted no defeat. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The arrival of international teams in Italy for the 1934 World Cup brought with it a palpable apprehension. The air, thick with the scent of Roman summer and the pervasive presence of fascist propaganda, seemed to hum with an unspoken tension. Teams from across Europe and beyond disembarked into a land where every banner proclaimed the Duce's greatness. Every street corner seemed to echo with the rhythmic chant of Duce, Duce. Altered, their initial excitement for the global spectacle was quickly tempered by the stark reality of Mussolini's Italy. Players and coaches alike exchanged uneasy glances, their smiles hesitant, their movements constrained by the watchful eyes that seemed to follow them everywhere. This was not just a football tournament. It was an immersive experience in a totalitarian state, a chilling prelude to the political maneuvering that would soon unfold on the pitches. The tournament structure itself, a single elimination knockout format from the very first whistle, amplified the already immense pressure. There was no group stage, no second chances, no margin for error. One bad game, one controversial call, and a team's World Cup dream would be over. This unforgiving format played directly into the hands of a regime that understood the power of high stakes and immediate consequences. For Italy, this meant every match was a final, every victory a reaffirmation of fascist superiority. The players, already burdened by Mussolini's win-or-die mandate, now faced an additional layer of professional dread. Whispers began almost immediately, circulating among the foreign delegations and the few brave international journalists who dared to question the official narrative. These whispers coalesced into a growing controversy surrounding the selection of referees, particularly the Swedish official Ivan Eklund. His name, initially just another on the list, soon became synonymous with suspicion. Reports, largely unconfirmed but persistently unsettling, suggested alleged ties between Eklund and the Italian regime. It was said he was a personal acquaintance of Mussolini, perhaps even a guest at state dinners, fostering an uncomfortable proximity that defied the very notion of impartial officiating. This shadow of doubt, cast early and deliberately, would loom large over the entire competition. Behind-the-scenes machinations were already in full swing, even before the first ball was kicked. Early reports and rumors detailed subtle yet undeniable political interference in match officiating. It wasn't always overt, not a direct bribe in plain sight, but rather a pervasive atmosphere of expectation, a silent instruction understood by those who wished to remain in favor. The system was designed to favor Italy, not through brute force, but through a series of almost imperceptible nudges, biases, and interpretations of the rules that consistently bent towards the host nation. The international media, restricted yet observant, picked up on these subtle cues, adding fuel to the fire of suspicion. The opening rounds saw Italy launch themselves into the tournament with a dominant, almost brutal style of play. Their matches were characterized by relentless aggression, unyielding defense, and swift, powerful attacks. The Azzurri were a force, driven by the sheer will to win, but also by the terror of failure. Each victory, hard-fought and often physically punishing for their opponents, was met with rapturous yet controlled celebrations in the stadiums. The players, under immense psychological duress, performed with a ferocious intensity that bordered on desperation. They were gladiators in a modern arena, their freedom and futures dependent on their prowess. Yet, beneath the surface of their determined expressions, a growing internal conflict gnawed at the Italian players. Brief glimpses into their increasing anxiety and moral dilemmas could be caught in fleeting moments. A player's eyes lingering on a distant fascist banner, a grimace after a particularly harsh tackle that went unpunished, or a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh in the locker room. They were winning, yes, but at what cost? The glory felt tainted, the cheers hollowed by the knowledge of the immense, unearned advantages they were being afforded. They were heroes on the field, but inside, some questioned the validity of their triumphs, haunted by the ethical concessions demanded of them. The burden of their nation's fascist ambition weighed heavily, transforming the joy of victory into a complex, unsettling emotion. The stadium atmosphere was a carefully choreographed spectacle of fascist fervor. Crowds, though immense and enthusiastic, were also controlled, their cheers often punctuated by synchronized fascist salutes. Black shirts patrolled the aisles, ensuring conformity, their presence a constant reminder of the regime's omnipresence. Chants of "Duce, Duce," mingled with cries of "Italia, Italia," blurring the lines between national pride and political allegiance. Every match was a rally, every goal a testament to the supposed superiority of the fascist ideal. The visual displays were grand, designed to awe and intimidate, creating an overwhelming sense of power and unity that left little room for dissent or even genuine, spontaneous emotion. Then came the moment that ignited the brewing suspicion into a full-blown inferno. In an early Italian victory, a questionable referee decision, delivered by none other than Ivan Eklund, sparked widespread whispers of foul play. It was a pivotal moment, a call that undeniably swung the momentum in Italy's favor, leaving their opponents bewildered and enraged. The specific incident, a disallowed goal or an uncalled foul in a critical sequence, was replayed endlessly in the minds of those who witnessed it, confirming their worst fears. The international media, now bolder in their reporting, seized upon the incident. The narrative began to shift. This was not just a World Cup. It was a stage for Mussolini's political theater, and the referees, particularly Eklund, were merely his obedient actors. The seeds of corruption had been sown, and they were already bearing bitter fruit. The stage was now set for a titanic clash, a match that promised to be more than just a game of football. Italy versus Spain. Both nations were renowned for their aggressive, unyielding styles of play, their teams embodying a fierce national pride. The anticipation for this quarter-final encounter vibrated through the stadiums and across the continent, promising a spectacle of raw athletic prowess. Yet, beneath the surface of sporting excitement, a different kind of tension simmered, fueled by the accumulating suspicions surrounding the tournament's integrity. The Spanish side, known for their fiery temperament and unwavering spirit, arrived in Florence with a grim determination, fully aware of the political currents swirling around them. They knew they weren't just facing 11 Italian footballers. They were confronting the full, intimidating might of Mussolini's meticulously orchestrated spectacle. The first match unfolded as a brutal, high-stakes encounter, a visceral display of footballing warfare. From the opening whistle, the game was characterized by extreme physicality, with tackles flying in from all directions and bodies colliding with bone-jarring force. The Spanish, refusing to be intimidated, met Italy's aggression with their own fervent intensity. But it was the controversial calls, or rather, the glaring lack thereof, that truly defined the 90 minutes. Ivan Eklund, the Swedish referee whose name had become synonymous with suspicion, was at the center of it all. His decisions, or lack of decisions, consistently favored the Italian national team. Fouls on Spanish players went unpunished, while Italian infringements were often overlooked or met with lenient warnings. The crowd, whipped into a frenzy by the fascist propaganda machine, roared at every Italian charge and jeered mercilessly at every Spanish protest, drowning out any semblance of fair play. A detailed analysis of Eklund's officiating revealed a pattern too consistent to be coincidental. A goal for Spain, seemingly legitimate, was mysteriously disallowed for an obscure infraction. Italian players, engaging in challenges that would typically warrant a booking, escaped without censure. The Spanish players, growing increasingly frustrated and incensed, found themselves battling not just their opponents, but an invisible yet undeniably present force manipulating the flow of the game. Their fury was palpable, their protests vociferous, but Eklund remained impervious, his demeanor unyielding. He was either remarkably incompetent or deliberately biased, and the latter seemed increasingly likely to anyone watching objectively. The physical toll on the Spanish team was immense. Players were battered and bruised, their bodies testament to the ferocity of the encounter and the unfair protection afforded to their Italian adversaries. Injuries mounted, but the Spanish, with their pride wounded and their sense of injustice burning, refused to yield. The match ended in a 1-1 draw, a result that, under normal circumstances, would necessitate extra time. However, the rules of the 1934 World Cup dictated a replay match the following day if a draw persisted after extra time. The Spanish players, exhausted and enraged, limped off the field, their faces a mask of anger and disbelief. Their coach, visibly fuming, confronted officials, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The image of a Spanish player, his face streaked with dirt and blood, glaring with undisguised contempt at Eklund as he walked off, became a powerful symbol of the tournament's burgeoning corruption. The political pressure for an Italian victory was immense, and Benito Mussolini, ever the opportunist, would not tolerate a stalemate. He demanded an Italian triumph, making it clear that anything less would be unacceptable. Thus, the replay was not just a sporting event, it was a political imperative. Despite the Spanish team's physical exhaustion and numerous injuries, they were forced to play again the very next day. There was no time for recovery, no consideration for their welfare. The decision underscored the regime's ruthless determination to secure its propaganda victory at any cost. The replay match was another violent spectacle, a continuation of the previous day's brutality, but with an even more pronounced display of biased officiating. With many of their key players injured and unable to participate, the Spanish team was at a severe disadvantage, yet they fought with incredible courage. The new referee, a Swiss official named René Mercier, seemed to have taken his cues directly from Eklund. He continued the pattern of overlooking Italian fouls and penalizing Spanish infractions with alarming consistency. The Spanish players, already physically and emotionally drained, found their spirits slowly eroded by the relentless unfairness. They were being systematically dismantled, not just by their opponent's skill, but by the insidious influence of the regime. Ultimately, the inevitable occurred. Italy secured a 1-0 victory in the replay, eliminating Spain from the tournament. The goal itself was shrouded in controversy, a moment of dubious officiating that allowed Italy to capitalize. The bitter taste of defeat for Spain was compounded by the undeniable sense of injustice. They left the tournament convinced that they had been robbed, not by superior football, but by a corrupt system designed to ensure Italian success. Their outrage was quieted by fear, their protests stifled by the pervasive atmosphere of authoritarianism. As the Italian players celebrated their hard-won, yet tainted, victory, the image of a battered Spanish player, his eyes burning with a mixture of pain and righteous indignation, staring directly at the departing referee, crystallized the tournament's underlying corruption. It was a silent accusation, a powerful testament to the perversion of sport for political gain, a moment that would forever stain the legacy of the 1934 World Cup. The Spanish Inferno had been extinguished, but the embers of controversy continued to glow, threatening to ignite a wider international outcry. The ignominious exit of the Spanish national team sent shockwaves through the international media, transforming the whispers of discontent into a growing chorus of outrage. Journalists from across Europe, initially hesitant to openly critique the host nation, now found their pens sharpened by the blatant injustices witnessed on the pitch. Headlines screamed of a fixed tournament and Mussolini's World Cup, openly accusing the Italian regime of perverting the beautiful game for political ends. Newspaper columns dissected Eklund's and Merset's decisions with surgical precision, highlighting the egregious errors and the clear pattern of bias. While the Italian press, tightly controlled by the fascist propaganda machine, eulogized their national heroes and dismissed any criticism as sour grapes from jealous rivals, the rest of the world watched with a mixture of disgust and apprehension. The ethical dilemma for the remaining teams deepened significantly. They were now acutely aware that their opponents were not merely the Italian players, but an entire system designed to ensure Italian triumph. How could one compete fairly when the rules themselves seemed to bend to the will of the dictator? The spirit of sportsmanship, once a guiding principle, felt increasingly fragile in the suffocating atmosphere of fascist Italy. Within the Italian national team, a palpable shift occurred. The initial euphoria of victory, especially against such formidable opposition as Spain, was tinged with a growing unease. The players, though outwardly celebrating, carried the immense burden of winning under such duress. They were heroes to the Italian public, lauded and adored, yet many privately wrestled with the moral cost of their success. The constant pressure from Benito Mussolini, the chilling win-or-die mandate, now felt heavier than ever. They had achieved their victories, but the manner in which they had been secured left a bitter residue. Whispers circulated in hushed tones in the locker rooms, glances exchanged that spoke volumes without a single word. Some players, veterans of countless battles on the field, found themselves questioning the very essence of their sport. Was this truly football, or merely a theatrical performance in a grand fascist play? The joy of scoring a goal, of executing a perfect pass, was slowly being overshadowed by the gnawing knowledge that their triumphs were not entirely their own, that they were merely instruments in a larger, more sinister agenda. Mussolini, meanwhile, was in his element. His public appearances became increasingly confident, his demeanor radiating a triumphalist swagger. He basked in the reflected glory of the Italian victories, using every opportunity to link the team's success directly to the strength and superiority of the fascist state. Newsreels, meticulously edited and distributed across the nation, showcased cheering crowds, powerful fascist salutes, and the victorious Italian players, always with Mussolini prominently featured, orchestrating the celebrations. Radio broadcasts, controlled by the regime, amplified the narrative, glorifying every Italian victory as a testament to the nation's resurgence under fascist leadership. Any dissenting voices, any hint of criticism from the international media were swiftly dismissed as foreign envy or communist propaganda. The sheer volume and relentless consistency of this propaganda effectively silenced much of the internal dissent, drowning out the few brave souls who dared to question the narrative. The fear of speaking out was omnipresent. Players, coaches, and even journalists understood the severe consequences of challenging the regime. A misplaced word, a critical glance, could lead to far more than just professional repercussions. It could mean imprisonment, exile, or worse. The atmosphere was one of enforced loyalty, where public adoration masked private anxieties. As the tournament progressed, Italy continued its controversial march towards the final. The semi-final match, another test of nerve and skill, saw them face another strong opponent. The pattern, however, remained disturbingly consistent. While the Italian national team displayed undeniable talent and grit, there were once again moments of questionable officiating that steered the game in their favor. The opposition, demoralized by the pervasive sense of injustice, fought valiantly but ultimately succumbed to the combined force of the Italian players and the subtle yet undeniable influence of the officiating. With each controversial victory, the Italian players felt the weight of their stolen triumphs pressing down on them, even as the public adored them. They were trapped, caught between the dictator's demands and their own flickering sense of sportsmanship. One evening, after a particularly contentious semi-final victory, a clandestine meeting unfolded in the dimly lit corridor connecting the players' dressing rooms to the outside world. Two Italian players, both veterans who had seen the game played with honor and integrity, exchanged hushed words. Their names, often celebrated in the fascist press, now carried a different kind of burden. One, a burly defender whose tackles were legendary, leaned against the cold stone wall, his face etched with fatigue and something deeper, something akin to sorrow. "This isn't right," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, eyes darting nervously around the empty hallway. "This isn't how we should win. It feels dirty." The other, a quick-footed forward known for his dazzling goals, nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Every time the whistle blows, I feel it," he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "The crowd cheers, but inside it's hollow. We are champions, yes, but at what cost? What will history say of this?" Their conversation, brief and fraught with peril, revealed the deep unease festering beneath the surface of their manufactured triumph. It was a poignant moment, a stark reminder that even amidst the roaring crowds and the dictator's grand pronouncements, the human conscience still wrestled with the moral compromises forced upon it. This whispered exchange, a small act of rebellion in a world demanding absolute conformity, underscored the true, internal struggle faced by the Italian national team, a struggle far more profound than any physical battle on the football pitch. The stage was now set for the final, but the victory, should it come, would carry with it the indelible stain of manipulation and ethical surrender. The anticipation for the World Cup final reached a fever pitch, a crescendo of manipulated fervor that gripped the entire nation. Italy, the host, against Czechoslovakia, a formidable and disciplined side, was not merely a football match, It was to be the ultimate coronation of fascist power on the global stage. Every newspaper, every radio broadcast, every public address system blared with confident predictions of Italian triumph. The air in Rome crackled with an almost unbearable tension, a mixture of genuine excitement and the chilling undercurrent of expectation enforced by the regime. For Benito Mussolini, this final was not just about a trophy. It was the definitive proof of Italian superiority, a spectacle designed to solidify his iron grip on the nation and project an image of unstoppable strength to the world. Before the match, the Italian national team faced their most chilling encounter yet. Mussolini himself, a figure of imposing authority and terrifying charisma, addressed the players in the hallowed confines of their locker room. His eyes, dark and piercing, swept across each man, lingering for a moment on those he perceived as wavering. There were no pleasantries, no motivational platitudes. Instead, his words were a stark, brutal reaffirmation of the win-or-die ultimatum that had haunted their every step since the tournament began. He spoke of national honor, of the destiny of the fascist state, of the sacrifices expected of true Italians. His voice, usually a booming instrument of propaganda, was now low, almost a hiss, making his threat all the more potent. He reminded them that failure was not an option, that the eyes of the world, and more importantly, the eyes of Italy, were upon them. The weight of his words settled upon the players like a shroud, suffocating any remaining flicker of personal ambition or sporting joy. They were no longer just footballers. They were soldiers in Mussolini's grand theatrical war, their victory a non-negotiable decree. The final match atmosphere was a cauldron of fascist fervor. The Stadio Nazionale PNF was a sea of black shirts, banners emblazoned with the fasces, and synchronized chants that reverberated through the colossal stadium. Every seat was filled, every spectator a participant in Mussolini's meticulously orchestrated display of nationalistic might. The roar that greeted the Italian team as they emerged onto the pitch was deafening, a sound designed to intimidate, to overwhelm, to leave no doubt as to who held dominion here. The Czechoslovakian national team, stoic and composed, walked into this maelstrom with quiet dignity, their faces betraying little emotion, though the sheer force of the hostile environment must have been palpable. The pressure on both teams was immense, but for the Italians it was a pressure laced with existential dread. The game itself was a tense, hard-fought battle, a testament to the skill and resilience of both sides. Italy, driven by the relentless demands of their dictator, played with an aggressive, almost desperate intensity. Their tackles were fierce, their runs tireless, their attacks relentless. The Czechoslovakians, however, were not easily broken. They defended with unwavering discipline, absorbing the Italian onslaught and launching dangerous counterattacks that tested the Italian defense. The match unfolded as a grueling war of attrition, each team grappling for dominance, each player pushing their physical and mental limits. The clock ticked agonizingly slowly, every minute feeling like an eternity under the oppressive atmosphere. As the first half wore on, the tension became almost unbearable. Italy pressed, but the Czechoslovakian goalkeeper, František Planica, was a wall, repelling every shot with incredible saves. The crowd grew restless, their initial roar morphing into an anxious hum, then punctuated by frustrated groans. Mussolini, observing from his VIP box, maintained a stony facade, but the subtle clenching of his jaw betrayed his impatience. The fascist dream of an easy, dominant victory was not materializing. The second half began with renewed Italian aggression, but still the deadlock persisted. The Czechoslovakians, growing in confidence, even managed to create several dangerous opportunities, sending shivers down the spines of the Italian faithful. Then came the key moments of controversy, the familiar shadow of biased officiating once again extending its reach. In the 71st minute, Czechoslovakia managed to break through, scoring a goal that silenced the roaring stadium, momentarily plunging it into an eerie quiet. Oldrich Nejedly, the Czech forward, had found the back of the net, a moment of pure sporting brilliance. But the elation of the Czechs was short-lived. The referee, Ivan Eklund, whose presence on the pitch for this final was already a source of international criticism, made a highly questionable call, disallowing the goal for an alleged foul that was barely perceptible if it existed at all. The decision sparked immediate outrage from the Czechoslovakian players, their protests falling on deaf ears, met only with dismissive waves from Eklund. The stadium, sensing a shift in momentum, cautiously erupted in a relieved cheer, a collective sigh of fascist contentment. Fueled by this reprieve, the Italian team surged forward with renewed vigor. The feeling of injustice, the perceived robbery, spurred the Czechoslovakians to fight even harder. But the psychological blow of the disallowed goal was immense. In the 81st minute, Italy finally found its breakthrough. Raimundo Orsi, the Argentine-born Italian forward, unleashed a powerful shot that curled past the valiant Planica. The stadium exploded. This time, there was no doubt, no controversy. A legitimate, if hard-won, goal. The roar was deafening, a release of pent-up anxiety and orchestrated triumph. The fascist celebration erupted with a fervor that bordered on hysteria. The lead, however, was slim, and the game still hung precariously in the balance. The final whistle, when it eventually came, was met with a moment of stunned silence. A collective breath, held before the stadium, erupted into a joyous, manic frenzy. Italy had won. The decisive goal had secured the victory, and with it, the World Cup trophy. The Czechoslovakian players, their faces etched with disappointment and a quiet, dignified fury, watched as the Italian jubilation unfolded around them. They knew they had been robbed, not just of a goal, but of a fair chance. Their silence, their stoic acceptance of a manipulated outcome, stood in stark contrast to the manufactured delirium of the Italian crowd. They had played their hearts out, demonstrated immense skill and courage, but in the end, it was not enough to overcome the combined forces of the Italian team and the unseen hand of the fascist regime. The final whistle, signaling Italy's triumph, was immediately followed by the deafening roar of the orchestrated celebrations, a sound that drowned out any lingering doubts, any whispers of injustice, cementing the fascist narrative of an unassailable victory. The immediate aftermath of the final whistle was a blur of orchestrated chaos, a carefully choreographed spectacle of nationalistic fervor designed to elevate Benito Mussolini and his fascist regime. The stadium, still vibrating from the collective roar of celebration, transformed into a stage for the Duce's grand pronouncements. Italian flags, emblazoned with the fasces, waved furiously, creating a dizzying sea of black, white, and red. Newsreel cameras, positioned strategically, captured every moment, ensuring that the image of a triumphant Italy, under the unwavering guidance of its leader, would be broadcast far and wide. Mussolini, his chest puffed out, a triumphant smirk plastered across his face, emerged from his VIP box to bask in the adulation. He strode onto the pitch, surrounded by his loyal black shirts, his presence eclipsing even that of the victorious players. The World Cup trophy, a gleaming symbol of sporting supremacy, was presented not as a testament to athletic prowess alone, but as an undeniable validation of fascist ideology. It was hoisted aloft by the Italian captain, But his gaze, and indeed the gazes of many of his teammates, seemed distant, almost detached. Their smiles, though wide and seemingly joyful for the cameras, held a forced quality, a thin veneer over the exhaustion and the profound, unsettling relief that coursed through them. They had delivered on their terrifying mandate. They had won. But at what cost? The weight of the golden trophy felt less like a celebration and more like a heavy burden, a tangible representation of the moral compromise they had been forced to make. The cheers of the crowd, though deafening, could not entirely drown out the quiet hum of their own internal struggles. Each player carried a unique mix of pride, fear, and an undeniable sense of having been used. For Ivan Eklund, the referee whose questionable decisions had so profoundly influenced the tournament's outcome, there were no immediate repercussions. Instead, his career continued, almost unfazed by the storm of controversy that brewed internationally. He officiated in later World Cups, and his name, though forever linked to the dubious events of 1934, never faced formal censure from FIFA. This lack of accountability only served to deepen the quiet disapproval from nations unwilling to directly challenge Italy. Many federations and sporting bodies issued polite, diplomatically worded complaints, but no concrete action was taken. The fear of Mussolini's growing power and the desire to maintain international relations, however strained, outweighed the pursuit of sporting justice. The international community, still reeling from the Great Depression and wary of further global instability, chose quiet condemnation over open confrontation. This subdued response, however, only emboldened Mussolini, reinforcing his belief that the world would tolerate his aggressions both on and off the football pitch. The legacy of the tournament, therefore, was far more profound than mere sporting triumph. It became a powerful tool in cementing Mussolini's power, not just within Italy, but on the international stage. The victory, meticulously spun by the fascist propaganda machine, was presented as irrefutable proof of Italian superiority, of the inherent strength and discipline of the fascist state. It fueled his imperial ambitions, providing a psychological boost and a sense of invincibility that would tragically lead to further aggressions in the years to come. The World Cup was not just a football tournament, it was a dress rehearsal for war, a demonstration of how sport could be perverted into a political weapon. Every goal, every save, every controversial decision was folded into the larger narrative of fascist dominance. The true cost of this victory, however, was immeasurable. It was a victory steeped in moral compromise, a triumph achieved at the expense of sportsmanship, fair play, and the very spirit of competition. The beautiful game had been defiled, twisted to serve a dark political agenda. The Italian players, though lauded as heroes, carried the invisible scars of their experience. They had been forced to sacrifice their integrity, to perform under duress, knowing that their success was not purely their own, but a product of external manipulation. Their jubilant celebrations were tinged with the knowledge of what had truly transpired, a bitter taste accompanying the champagne. A lingering shot of the Italian captain, Giuseppe Meazza, holding the gleaming trophy high above his head, would often capture this complex reality. His eyes, though ostensibly fixed on the roaring crowd, seemed to hold a haunted, distant quality. The broad smile on his lips did not quite reach them. It was the smile of a man who had stared into the abyss of political intimidation and emerged victorious, but not unscathed. The trophy, heavy in his hands, was not just gold and silver. It was laden with the unspoken truths of biased officiating, of forced patriotism, and of a victory that felt less like a celebration and more like an obligation fulfilled. The cheers continued, the masses rejoiced, But in the quiet corners of their souls, the Italian players knew the bitter truth. Their triumph was tainted. Their glory, a shadow cast by the Deuce's iron will. The world had witnessed a football tournament, but Italy had staged a political coup, disguised in the guise of sport. The reverberations of this dark victory would echo for decades, a stark reminder of how easily the purity of competition could be corrupted by the insidious grasp of power. The immediate aftermath of the 1934 World Cup victory saw Italy's domestic and international standing dramatically altered. Within its borders, the triumph was heralded as irrefutable proof of Fascist Italy's might and modernity. Propaganda channels, from state-controlled newspapers to ubiquitous radio broadcasts, tirelessly reinforced the narrative that the World Cup was not merely a sporting achievement, but a national vindication, a testament to the superior Italian spirit forged under Mussolini's leadership. The public, already subjected to years of relentless indoctrination, largely embraced this interpretation, their national pride swelling with each celebratory parade and each glowing newsreel. Internationally, the perception was more complex. While some nations, particularly those with authoritarian leanings, lauded Italy's success, others viewed it with a mixture of suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. The whispers of biased officiating and political interference, though officially denied, persisted in foreign press and diplomatic circles. Yet, few dared to openly challenge Mussolini, whose regime, emboldened by this perceived success, began to project an even more aggressive posture on the world stage. This World Cup victory, therefore, served as a chillingly effective stepping stone towards greater aggression. Mussolini, convinced that the international community's subdued reaction to the tournament's controversies indicated a weakness or unwillingness to confront him, grew bolder in his foreign policy ambitions. The seemingly easy manipulation of a global event like the World Cup reinforced his belief in the efficacy of propaganda and the limits of international resistance. It provided a powerful, if illusory, sense of invincibility that would soon translate into tangible acts of expansionism. The triumph on the football pitch became a psychological precursor to military conquests, fostering a nationalistic fervor that could be harnessed for future conflicts. The cheers for goals scored against Czechoslovakia subtly morphed into calls for imperial dominance, demonstrating how deeply sport could be intertwined with the machinations of power. The players, the men who had been forced to carry the weight of a nation's fascist ambitions on their shoulders, went on to lead varied lives, forever marked by their experience. Many continued their football careers, some achieving further success, but the shadow of 1934 never truly left them. Giuseppe Meazza, the captain, would remain a legend of Italian football, his name synonymous with skill and artistry. Yet, historians and biographers would often note a certain melancholy in his later years, a reluctance to speak extensively about the 1934 triumph, perhaps hinting at the internal conflicts he wrestled with. Other players, less famous, faded into relative obscurity, their stories lost to the larger historical narrative. But for all of them, the memory of Mussolini's chilling mandate, the palpable fear of failure, and the moral ambiguity of their victory undoubtedly shaped their perspectives on success, patriotism, and the true cost of glory. Their reflections, often unspoken or delivered with carefully chosen words decades later, painted a picture of men caught between duty to their nation and the integrity of their sport. The shadow of World War II loomed large over the decade following the 1934 World Cup, and in retrospect, the tournament appeared as a stark, early harbinger of the coming global conflict. The fascist rhetoric of national supremacy, the aggressive tactics, the disregard for fair play, and the manipulation of international events for political gain, all these elements were magnified and tragically realized in the war that engulfed the world just 5 years later. The World Cup became a microcosm of the larger geopolitical struggles, a chilling dress rehearsal where Mussolini tested the waters of international tolerance for his audacious displays of power. The unprotested perversion of sport served as an unfortunate precedent, suggesting that other, more grievous transgressions might also be met with insufficient resistance. The world's quiet disapproval of the rigged tournament mirrored its initial hesitancy to confront fascist expansionism, allowing the seeds of conflict to germinate. This brings into sharp focus the enduring question of sports and politics, a debate that the 1934 World Cup continues to ignite. Can sport truly be separated from politics, especially when governments actively seek to exploit its universal appeal for their own ends? The events of 1934 unequivocally demonstrated that when power is unchecked and ambition boundless, sport becomes a potent and easily manipulated tool. It forces a broader reflection on the ethical responsibilities of international sporting bodies like FIFA, and the critical importance of safeguarding the integrity of competition against external pressures. The World Cup, intended as a celebration of athletic prowess and international camaraderie, was instead transformed into a political weapon, its noble ideals trampled under the boots of fascism. Modern perspectives on the 1934 World Cup offer a critical reassessment of its true meaning, stripping away the layers of fascist propaganda to reveal the stark reality beneath. Contemporary historians and sports analysts largely agree that the tournament was deeply compromised, a deliberate exploitation of sport for political gain. The narrative of a glorious, undisputed Italian victory has been replaced by one of a tainted triumph, a testament to Mussolini's ruthless efficiency in bending institutions to his will. The heroism attributed to the Italian team is now viewed through a more nuanced lens, acknowledging their skill while simultaneously recognizing the immense, unethical pressures they faced. This historical reevaluation seeks to understand not just what happened on the pitch, but the profound implications of what happened behind the scenes, and how it shaped both the trajectory of Italian fascism and the future of international sport. The enduring stain of the 1934 World Cup saga continues to mar the victory in the eyes of history. It serves as a permanent cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how political agendas can corrupt the purest forms of human endeavor. The controversy surrounding Ivan Eklin's refereeing, the alleged threats to players, and Mussolini's overt manipulation remain indelible marks against the tournament's legacy. Unlike other World Cup victories celebrated purely for their athletic brilliance, the 1934 triumph carries with it an inescapable moral burden, a constant whisper of injustice that prevents it from being viewed in an unblemished light. The Golden Trophy, though physically present in Italy's historical archives, is metaphorically tarnished, forever intertwined with the dark machinations of a totalitarian regime. A historical document from a later period, perhaps a declassified diplomatic cable from the late 1940s, or an excerpt from a memoir written by a former Italian player decades after the war, often offers a critical re-evaluation of the event. Such a document might articulate the profound unease felt by international observers at the time, or reveal the true extent of the psychological toll on the Italian team. It could be a simple newspaper clipping from a neutral country published years later, reflecting on the 1934 tournament with the hindsight of World War II, unequivocally condemning the political perversion of sport that foreshadowed greater evils. These retrospective analyses, distanced from the immediate pressures and propaganda of the fascist era, provide the necessary critical distance to truly understand the depth of the corruption and the lasting impact of that tainted victory. They underscore that history, given time and perspective, often provides the most searing indictment. The human cost of the 1934 World Cup extended far beyond the immediate disappointment of the defeated teams. It etched itself onto the very souls of those involved, leaving indelible scars that time could never fully heal. For the Italian players, the triumph was a gilded cage, a victory born of fear and coercion. They were heroes on the streets, showered with accolades and paraded as symbols of fascist might, yet privately, many struggled with the moral weight of their achievement. The relentless pressure from Mussolini, the unspoken threat of dire consequences for failure, had forced them into a Faustian bargain, glory at the expense of their athletic integrity. Some, like Giuseppe Meazza, carried this burden with quiet dignity, their public stoicism masking an inner turmoil. Others found solace in the fleeting pleasures of fame, but even these could not fully erase the memory of what they had endured. The opposing players, particularly the Spanish national team, bore physical and emotional wounds. Their battered bodies and shattered spirits were a testament to the brutal officiating and the sheer injustice they faced. They returned home not as heroes, but as men who had been robbed, their pride wounded, their faith in fair play severely shaken. The Czechoslovakian national team, though less physically brutalized, carried the sting of a victory stolen, their valiant efforts undermined by forces beyond the football pitch. Each individual, whether victor or vanquished, was a testament to the corrosive power of politics when it infiltrates the realm of sport. The psychological impact of the tournament reverberated through their lives for decades. The Italian players, forever associated with Mussolini's regime, found their legacy inseparable from the dark shadow of fascism. Even after the war, as Italy sought to rebuild its identity, their 1934 triumph remained a complex, often uncomfortable topic. They were celebrated for their skill, yet simultaneously implicated in a system they had no choice but to serve. This moral compromise, a constant undercurrent in their personal histories, often manifested as a reluctance to discuss the tournament in detail, a guardedness that hinted at unresolved internal conflicts. For the international players who had witnessed the corruption firsthand, the experience fostered a deep cynicism toward the intersection of sports and power. It challenged their fundamental belief in the purity of competition, leaving them with a bitter understanding of how easily cherished ideals could be perverted. The scars were not always visible, but they ran deep, affecting their perspectives on patriotism, sportsmanship, and the very nature of truth. The 1934 World Cup ultimately became a cautionary tale in sports history, a stark reminder of the perils of unchecked power and the insidious nature of political interference. Its legacy of corruption served as a blueprint for future discussions on ethical governance in international sports organizations. It highlighted the critical need for independent officiating, transparent processes, and robust mechanisms to protect athletes from exploitation. The alleged ties between Ivan Eklund and the Italian regime, though never fully proven in a court of law, cast a long shadow over the integrity of the refereeing profession, prompting greater scrutiny and calls for accountability. The tournament's controversies, meticulously documented and re-examined over the decades, became a powerful example cited whenever the debate arose about the separation of sports and politics. It underscored that when the lines blur, the very essence of competition is compromised, and the spirit of fair play is sacrificed at the altar of political ambition. This event also provided a chilling demonstration of the power of propaganda, a final, stark reminder of its ability to distort truth and manipulate perception on a global scale. Mussolini's fascist regime masterfully wielded the World Cup as a tool, transforming a sporting event into a grand theatrical production designed to project an image of strength, unity, and invincibility. Through carefully controlled media, choreographed celebrations, and relentless rhetoric, the narrative of a glorious, unblemished victory was broadcast far and wide, silencing dissent and shaping public opinion. The manufactured fervor in the stadiums, the fervent salutes, and the synchronized cheers were all part of a meticulously planned spectacle intended to legitimize fascism and rally support for Mussolini's imperial ambitions. The 1934 World Cup proved that if a lie is repeated often enough and presented with sufficient grandeur, it can momentarily eclipse the truth, even in the realm of international sport. The enduring relevance of the 1934 World Cup still resonates today, making it a pivotal moment that continues to hold significant historical weight. It stands as a timeless case study for examining the complex interplay between sports, politics, and ethics. In an era where global sporting events are increasingly intertwined with national identity and geopolitical agendas, the lessons of 1934 serve as a vital reminder. It prompts ongoing discussions about the responsibility of host nations, the integrity of governing bodies, and the vulnerability of athletes caught in the cross-currents of political ambition. The tournament's dark legacy serves as a constant point of reference for those who advocate for the purity of sport, warning against the dangers of allowing external forces to dictate outcomes and erode the foundational principles of fair competition. A final reflection on the 1934 World Cup leaves one with a profound sense of melancholy, a lasting message about the dangers of unchecked power and the perversion of sport. It is a testament to how easily noble endeavors can be corrupted when placed in the hands of those driven by totalitarian ideologies. The true triumph that year was not Italy's victory on the field, but the resilience of the human spirit that, despite immense pressure, still sought to play with honor, even if that honor was ultimately undermined. The tournament provided a chilling preview of the destructive forces that would soon engulf Europe, demonstrating how the manipulation of national pride and collective fervor could pave the way for greater atrocities. The call to remember the 1934 World Cup is not merely an academic exercise. It is an urgent plea to understand history in order to prevent its repetition. It implores us to remain vigilant against any attempt to weaponize sport for political gain, to uphold the values of fair play, integrity, and international camaraderie above all else. As the final image fades, perhaps an empty stadium, its grandstands silent and hollow, or a faded photograph of the Italian team, their smiles seemingly forced, a lone player's contemplation etched with a profound sense of the event's dark legacy, the message is clear. The Cup of Fear was not just a trophy won, but a warning issued, echoing through time, reminding humanity of the fragile balance between national pride and moral integrity, and the ultimate cost when that balance is lost.